What happens when closure becomes the final crack that ends everything? Can a woman's idea of harmless nostalgia destroy her marriage, her family's trust, and her own sense of power? When the husband finally stops arguing and starts documenting, the last time really means the end. I'm Celia Dawn, and I used to think being honest about my feelings made me the better person. I told myself that wanting closure with my ex wasn't betrayal. It was maturity. Aaron, my husband, didn't see it that way. He said some doors should stay closed, but I've never liked being told what to do. I believed I could handle my emotions like a professional balancing a schedule. Tidy, controlled, efficient. So when Marcus reached out after years, I told Aaron it was harmless, that I just needed to clear the air. The truth is, I missed the way Marcus looked at me, like I was still excited, still wanted. Aaron had become careful, quiet, and predictable. I told myself that love was fading, not stability. I told myself that meeting Marcus again was just about peace of mind. I said the words one last time, like they meant nothing, but they carried weight I refused to feel. Everyone warned me, my friends, Aaron's sister, even my own mother. But I laughed it off. They didn't understand that I wasn't reckless. I was real. Now, sitting here alone, I keep replaying those words, one last time, and how they turned into the last thing I ever said as his wife. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started in the kitchen on a Thursday evening, the kind that smelled like reheated pasta and quiet tension. Aaron was sorting mail at the counter when I mentioned, as casually as I could, that Marcus had reached out. I said it like it was no big deal, like I was talking about an old coworker instead of the man I once almost married. Aaron didn't look up at first. He just said, "For what reason?" I told him it was nothing, just catching up. He said, "You don't need closure from someone who already closed the door." That line annoyed me more than it should have. I told him he was being controlling, that it wasn't fair for him to decide who I could talk to. He said he wasn't deciding anything, just giving his opinion. I said his opinions always came out like rules. He sighed, the kind of sigh that feels heavier than words, and went back to the mail. Inside, I felt the old spark of rebellion, the one that told me I was right even when I wasn't. I thought, he's so dull now. He doesn't get it. I wanted to prove that I could be trusted, that I was just being transparent, so I said I'd agreed to meet Marcus for coffee. Aaron finally looked up then, eyes sharp. "You what?" he said. I told him it was better to be open than secretive. He asked if I even realized how that sounded. I said I did, but I wasn't doing anything wrong. We barely spoke through dinner. Milo, our son, kept asking about the new art project he'd made, trying to fill the silence. I nodded at him, pretending to listen, while Aaron ate in small, slow bites. When Milo left to play upstairs, Aaron said, "You're not the same person anymore." I said, "People grow." He said, "People respect boundaries when they love someone." I smiled tightly and said, "You'd know that if you listened more." That night in bed, I scrolled through old messages from Marcus. His words were light, nostalgic, harmless on the surface, but they made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, seen, wanted. I told myself Aaron had made me invisible, that this wasn't about love, just about understanding who I used to be. When Aaron came into the room, he stood at the doorway for a long moment before speaking. He said, "If you go, don't pretend it's for closure. Just admit it's for you." I didn't answer. I turned off the light instead. I lay awake for hours, convincing myself I was doing the mature thing. I even rehearsed lines in my head. How I'd tell Marcus I'd moved on, that I was happy. It would be quick, simple, clean. Aaron would see that he overreacted. The next morning, the air between us was glass thin. He packed Milo's lunch without speaking. I tried to act normal, humming while I made coffee. When I leaned against the counter, I could feel him watching me, but he said nothing. Before leaving for work, he put the mail on the table and said, "Some things don't need to be reopened, Celia." I smiled and said, "Then maybe some things shouldn't be left unresolved." He didn't answer. The door shut behind him with a quiet click that lingered longer than the sound itself. After he left, I checked my phone. Marcus had texted, "Still on for tomorrow?" Miss talking like that again. My stomach flipped, but I typed back quickly, "Yes, one last time." I looked around the kitchen, the stacked plates, the silent clock, the half-finished cup of coffee Erin left behind. Everything felt too still, like it was waiting for me to make a choice I already had. I told myself it was only coffee, just words, just closure. But when the screen dimmed and that final text glowed faintly in the reflection of the window, it felt like more than a plan. It felt like the start of an ending I refused to see coming. From the hallway, I heard the front door close again. Aaron must have forgotten something. My heart jumped, but it was only the sound of his car starting, pulling away for real this time. The house went quiet. Then my phone buzzed again, a small private hook I couldn't ignore. The cafe where Marcus and I met hadn't changed much since college. Same brick walls, same smell of roasted beans and rain-damp coats. I arrived early, pretending not to be nervous. I ordered a drink I didn't really want and checked my reflection in the window, smoothing my hair like it mattered. When Marcus walked in, smiling that same easy smile, I felt something in me tighten. He said it was good to see me after all these years. I said it was weird but nice, like we were two old friends who'd just drifted apart. He asked how married life was. I told him Erin was steady, then added, "Maybe too steady." He laughed softly and said I hadn't changed. I still needed excitement. I pretended to roll my eyes but didn't disagree. For the next hour, we talked about the past, about how young we were, and how everything had felt possible. I told him he'd broken my heart but that I was over it. He said he never stopped wondering if we'd made the wrong choices. When he reached across the table to touch my hand, I didn't pull away. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It just felt like proof that someone still remembered me as something more than a wife and a mother. I told myself it was harmless, that Erin would never understand the need to feel seen. After we said goodbye, Marcus hugged me, longer than he should have. I noticed someone nearby with their phone raised, probably taking a picture. I laughed nervously and said people were nosy. Marcus said, "Let them talk." I walked to my car with my heart racing, half from guilt, half from something else I refused to name. When I got home, Aaron was in the kitchen again, his laptop open. He asked how my meeting went. I said it was fine, quick, normal. He nodded without looking at me. I tried to make conversation, but he was distant, too calm. He said he had some late work to finish. I told him he was being cold. He said, "I'm just tired." Later, while brushing my teeth, I caught him in the mirror, still sitting at the table, typing something, the screen glowing on his face. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Sorting things." His tone was flat, careful. I didn't press. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Trish, my co-worker. It was a photo, Marcus and me, at the cafe, his hand on mine. The caption said, "Old flames never die." My chest tightened. I wrote back immediately, "Where did you get this?" She said someone had posted it in our local social group. I told her it wasn't what it looked like. She said, "It never is, right?" At work, people were polite but curious. I could feel the glances, hear the whispered laughter. Trish stopped by my desk and said I might want to get ahead of it before Aaron saw. I told her he already knew, that we were fine. She looked doubtful. When I came home, Aaron was on the phone. He said quietly, "No, it's handled. I have everything saved." When he noticed me, he hung up. I asked who it was. He said, "Work." I didn't believe him. I said, "You're acting strange." He said, "I could say the same." I tried to touch his arm, but he stepped back. I said, "It was just one coffee." He said, "You keep saying just as if that changes what it means." I went to bed early, pretending I didn't care, but I couldn't stop thinking about that picture, how easily it could twist everything. I told myself people gossip, it would pass. Then, just as I started to drift off, my phone lit up again. Trish had tagged me in a post before deleting it a minute later. The preview read, "When closure looks like chemistry." My stomach dropped. From the living room, I heard Aaron's chair scrape against the floor. A door shut quietly. That soft, deliberate sound told me what I didn't want to know. He'd seen it too. By morning, the silence in the house was different, tight, heavy, almost rehearsed. Aaron didn't speak during breakfast. He packed Milo's lunch with slow, precise movements, as if order could erase emotion. I tried to break the ice, asking if he'd be home for dinner. He said, without looking up, "We'll see." Milo looked between us, frowning. He asked if Daddy was mad. I said, "Of course not," too quickly. Aaron just said, "Finish your cereal, buddy." When they left, I told myself it would all blow over. It was just a picture after all. I'd explained that nothing happened, that people twisted things online. By noon, though, my phone was full of notifications, private messages, screenshots, even a few laughing emojis from old friends. Someone had reposted the photo with a caption calling me bold for keeping two men warm. I tried to laugh it off, but my hands trembled when I typed my replies. At work, Trish cornered me near the coffee station. She said, "You should talk to him before this gets worse." I said, "He's overreacting." She said, "You humiliated him." I told her to mind her own business, but her words stuck. When I came back to my desk, Aaron had texted, "We'll discuss this tonight. Please be home." The politeness of it scared me more than anger would have. When I got home, the house felt staged. The lights were dim, the table cleared, as if he'd prepared for a speech. He was waiting in the living room, calm, too calm. He said, "I saw the comments." I said, "They're strangers. They don't know us." He said, "They know enough." I started explaining how Marcus and I were just talking, how people misunderstood, but he didn't interrupt or argue. He just listened, quietly. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it. I said, "You're supposed to defend me." He said, "You're supposed to respect me." I told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You used to call honesty love. What do you call this?" I said, "It's not dishonesty, it's misinterpretation." He said, "Then interpret this. I'm done being your villain." I felt my throat close, but I forced a laugh. "So what? You're just walking away?" I said. He said, "No, I'm finally sitting still." He turned, picked up a small box from the table, and handed me his wedding ring. I asked what he was doing. He said, "I'm not giving up, I'm letting go." Before I could react, Milo came down the stairs holding a toy. He looked at us and asked, "Are you fighting again?" I knelt, forcing a smile, saying we were just talking loudly. Aaron said gently, "Go back up, bud." Milo hesitated, then said, "Daddy, are you leaving?" Aaron looked at me before answering, "Just the room for now." Milo nodded slowly and went back upstairs, small feet echoing in the quiet. As soon as he was gone, I said, "You can't do this in front of him." Aaron said, "You already did." His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. That made it worse. He walked past me toward the stairs. I grabbed his arm, said we could fix it, that I'd delete my account, make a post clarifying everything. He said, "You can't delete what you enjoyed." Then he pulled away and went upstairs. For a long time, I just stood there, my reflection caught in the black TV screen. Me, the woman who thought she could control perception. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Crying would make it real. Then I heard the soft sound of a door latch clicking from upstairs. It was so quiet, almost gentle, but final. The guest room. He wasn't leaving. Not yet, but he was gone. The next few days moved like fog. Aaron and I spoke only when necessary, exchanging words that sounded like instructions. Lunch is packed. He has practice at 5. I'll pick him up. Each sentence came trimmed of warmth, as if we'd both decided emotion was wasteful. I told myself he was being childish, giving me the silent treatment to feel powerful. Still, every time I heard the creak of the guest room door, my stomach tightened. I tried to repair my image instead of my marriage. I deleted posts, changed privacy settings, even sent a message to the local group asking people to be respectful. Most ignored it. Some replied with laughing emojis. Trish called to say she felt bad about sharing the photo in the first place. I told her it wasn't her fault, but she didn't sound convinced. On Saturday, I took Milo to Iris's house. She'd texted earlier, saying it would be good for him to play outside. I thought she meant to give me a break, but when I arrived, her tone was different. Measured, firm. She asked me to sit with her in the garden while Milo ran through the sprinkler. She poured tea and said, "Aaron told me what happened." I said, "He loves making himself the victim." She said, "He didn't. He just looked tired." I tried to explain that the photo was taken out of context. Iris said softly, "Context doesn't change patterns." I asked what she meant, but she only looked at the flowers, trimming one carefully. "Celia," she said, "you can't keep testing love to see if it breaks. One day it won't mend." I said, "You think I'm some kind of monster?" She said, "No, I think you're someone who confuses attention for affection." Her calmness stung worse than anger. I stood, pretending to check on Milo, and said I needed to go soon. She nodded, not arguing. As I walked toward the car later, I caught her whispering to Aaron on the phone, something about keeping things civil for Milo's sake. That night, Aaron and I sat across from each other at the table like strangers in a waiting room. I told him Iris was meddling. He said, "She's worried." I said, "She never liked me." He said, "She liked who you were." I slammed my fork down and said, "You all act like I'm the only one at fault." He said, "You're the only one who keeps pretending there's no fault at all." Milo came in then, holding a drawing. "It's all of us," he said proudly. Aaron smiled faintly, but his eyes flickered when he saw that Milo had drawn me standing apart, a small line between us. I laughed it off, saying kids exaggerate. Milo frowned. "You two used to hold hands," he said. The silence that followed felt unbearable. I told Milo to go play, but his question lingered in the air like smoke. Aaron didn't say anything. He just stood and began clearing plates. When he walked past me, I caught a glimpse of his phone screen. Calendar open, an event titled Downtown 10:15. Later, in bed alone, I stared at the ceiling, repeating the words in my head. Downtown. 10:15. It sounded ordinary, but not in his voice. He'd always been predictable, yes, but now his silence carried direction, intent. The next morning, I asked him about it casually. He just said, "Errand." I asked if it was work. He said, "Something like that." He kissed Milo on the head before leaving, then looked at me for the briefest second, his face unreadable. When the door closed, the sound seemed sharper than usual, almost deliberate. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Appointment confirmed. Monday. I stared at it, unsure if it was meant for me or about me. Monday arrived grey and heavy. Aaron was already dressed when I came downstairs, jacket pressed, coffee half finished. I asked where he was going so early. He said, "Downtown." I asked what for. He said, "Just something that needs doing." His tone was polite, final. Milo ran in, asking if Daddy could stay for breakfast, but Aaron kissed him on the head and said, "Next time, buddy." When the door closed behind him, the house felt emptier than it should have. I tried to distract myself with work, but I couldn't focus. Every little sound, the hum of the fridge, the ping of my email, felt too loud. Around noon, Trish called. She said she'd seen Aaron near the courthouse while running errands. My pulse jumped. I asked what he was doing there. She said, "I don't know, but he didn't look like a man out shopping." I told her she must have been mistaken, but she didn't answer. By afternoon, I was pacing. I checked his location on my phone, but he'd turned it off. He'd never done that before. I texted him twice, no reply. Then at 3, I saw a message come through. "Home soon. We'll talk then." That was all. Simple, neat, cold. When he came in, he placed his keys on the counter and said, "We need to make a plan for Milo." I blinked. "What kind of plan?" I asked. He said, "Structure." I laughed nervously, asking if this was about the picture again. He said, "It's about everything." I started defending myself, saying it was one mistake, one misunderstanding. He said, "You call it a misunderstanding because you refuse to understand." I told him we could go to counseling. He said, "I'm already getting advice." I asked what that meant. He just looked at me and said, "I'll handle it properly." The calmness of his voice frightened me. He didn't sound angry or hurt, just organized, measured. I told him he was overreacting, that families don't go to lawyers every time they argue. He didn't respond. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Household. I'd seen it before, filled with bills and receipts, but now I noticed new papers tucked inside. He placed it on the counter, like proof of something I hadn't realized I'd given him. I said, "You've been keeping track of me." He said, "I've been keeping track of reality." My throat went dry. I reached for the folder, but he stopped me. "You've rewritten this story enough times," he said quietly. "Now I need facts." I accused him of trying to humiliate me. He said, "No, I'm protecting myself." That word, protecting, hit me harder than I expected. I said, "From your wife?" He said, "From someone I no longer recognize." Milo came in just then, asking if we were okay. I smiled too wide and said, "Of course, sweetheart." Aaron crouched and told him to grab his backpack. "You're staying with Grandma tonight," he said. Milo asked why. Aaron said, "Just a sleepover." When the door closed behind them, I stood alone in the kitchen. The clock ticked loudly. I poured myself a drink and stared at the folder on the counter. My reflection in the shiny cover looked like a stranger. I picked it up, thinking I'd find answers inside, but it was locked with a small clip. I set it down again. The house was too quiet. I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I called Iris, but she said, "You should talk to Aaron directly." Her voice was polite but edgy. Hours later, the sun went down, and I was still sitting at the table, waiting for something. An apology, a message, anything. Instead, my phone vibrates once more. A text from Aaron. "Tomorrow morning, you'll understand." I typed back, "Understand what?" No reply. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, my heart racing. Upstairs, the guest room door clicked shut again. Soft, steady, certain. The next morning felt unreal. The air was thick, the house too still. I dressed quickly, trying not to think about Aaron's last text. When I heard a car pull up outside, I assumed it was him coming back early. I went to the door, half ready to start another argument, half hoping he'd changed his mind. But it wasn't Aaron. A woman in a blazer stood there, holding an envelope. Behind her, Aaron waited by his car, arms crossed, expression calm. The woman asked my name, then handed me the papers. She said, "You've been served." My mouth went dry. I looked down at the top page, petition for divorce and temporary custody orders. I turned toward Aaron. "You're actually doing this," I said. He nodded once. "You said you wanted honesty," he said quietly. "This is mine." I told him he couldn't take Milo from me. He said, "I'm not taking him. I'm protecting him." The woman asked me to sign for receipt. My hand trembled as I did, ink smearing. Aaron didn't look angry, only tired, like a man who'd already finished grieving. I said, "You're humiliating me." He said, "No, you did that yourself." When they left, I stood frozen on the porch, holding the papers that fluttered in the breeze. Across the street, a neighbor paused mid-step, watching. I wanted to shout that it was a mistake, that I was misunderstood. Instead, I just stood there, realizing Aaron hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't needed to. The last page slipped from my hands, landing face up on the porch. My name beside his, separated by a clean printed line. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.